Good evening, and thank you for coming to our Building Team Summit tonight. We are excited you're here, and I know most of you are members of building teams, and I just want to start by thanking you for the time you have already committed to this process. For those of you who are here tonight and are not a member of a building team, we want to encourage you tonight to join one or more building teams, because you're going to be hearing tonight about some of the great work that's going to be happening on those building teams as we move forward into January, February, and March. And so I've got a number of announcements I need to walk through tonight before we get started. First of all, as we're doing for all of our community meetings, we are videotaping the meeting tonight, and we're doing that so those who are not able to be here will have an opportunity to see what we do tonight. Also, all of the feedback that you provide to us tonight, as we've done at all of our other meetings, is going to be transcribed verbatim and entered onto our website. It's very important, and the Board of Education has made it clear to us that this process must be transparent every step of the way. And so with that, I would like to introduce the members of the Board of Education we have with us tonight. We have the President of the Board with us, Nancy Dries. Nancy. We have board members Stacy Royer and Carol Moore. Where's Carol? And our Vice President Matt McClellan is going to be here in a few minutes, and Robin Comfort was not able to join us tonight, but we want to thank them for their leadership in this process. If this is the first time you have been to a building team meeting, so you've joined a building team or you're joining one tonight and you've not been to one yet, we have a building team folder that we're going to have for you at the end of the evening. Chris, where is Chris? Chris, where are we going to pick up those building team folders? Right up here. And so this is Chris Potts, and if you're on a building team but you've not picked up a folder yet, you're going to want to get a folder from Chris before you leave tonight. As you know, our theme for this entire process is Your Voice Matters, and that is incredibly important to us. And so you're going to see tonight that we are going to be a little less formal than we've been in some of our other meetings, because this is really meant to be a working session. So as we move throughout the evening, if you have a question you need to ask, just go ahead and raise your hand, and we'll be happy to pause throughout the evening and answer those questions as they come up. I need to know, is there anyone in the room for whom this is their first meeting about the facilities process? Could you just raise your hand so I get a sense of that? Okay, great. Well, welcome. We are thrilled you are here. I just want to give you a 30-second overview. You are a part of the first of a three-phase process. We're in the assessment phase, and we had a meeting a few weeks ago where we talked about the physical assessment of our schools. And you'll see all the information from that meeting on our website. How many of you saw the story in the Columbus Dispatch that ran yesterday with a great picture of Chris Potts? All right? It was an awesome story. If you haven't seen that story, it really does a good job of talking about our process. And you can see that by going to the Dispatch website or visiting our Facebook page, or you can catch it on my Twitter feed or the UA Schools Twitter feed. But I would encourage you to check out that article. We think they did a really good job on that for us. So the assessment phase of our process is actually ending next week. And there will be a formal report to the Board of Education. And that'll happen next week on Tuesday night at 6 o'clock. And the board meetings are held at the City Building. And so if you'd like to come and hear the final report on the assessment phase, please come and join us at the Board of Education meeting next Tuesday at 6 o'clock. If you're not able to be there, guess what? We're going to videotape that for you. We're going to put it on the website. And we're also going to put that entire report on the website. So you'll be able to see that. Also wanted to talk a little bit about what's coming next. So our second phase is the options phase. And as we've been telling you all along, the options are not going to be coming from us. They're going to be coming from you. You're going to be doing that work for us. And so at the end of the evening tonight, to actually start that process, you're all going to receive a paper like this, and we're going to ask you tonight to begin giving us your feedback on different options you would like to have ready to review at your building team meetings that are scheduled for January. Because we don't want to walk into those meetings in January with a blank piece of paper. We actually want to be ready to get down to business. And so we're going to ask you to fill these out tonight and give us ideas of what some of the options you would like to see presented at your first meeting, so you can begin the process of working on those options. Please know as well that we're going to send out an email to all of the building team members, because we know everyone couldn't be here tonight. And so those that are not here are going to receive this in an email tomorrow. And we're going to ask them to have these back to us by next Friday. If you would like to take more time than just tonight to fill this out, I would ask you to have it back to us by next Friday, and you can drop it off at our central office, which is on the Mallway in front of Jones, or you can drop it off at any school building. But again, we would like to have these back by next Friday, because this is going to form the basis of how we design the options that we're going to be looking at your first meeting. And Steve's going to talk to you about that as we move through. There are sign-up sheets on your tables. And so we need to make sure that everyone signs in. We are continually trying to build our email list so we can do a good job of keeping in touch with you. We do not want anyone to miss anything. And so please, it's very important to us that you sign in. Now, last month as we were together, we talked exclusively about the physical assessment of our buildings. And we talked about the needs of our buildings, and they are significant needs. We talked about the fact that our backs are against the wall, because our buildings, many of them were all built in about the same era, and the major building systems are all coming to their end of life at about the same time. And so we need to commit to this process so together we can determine our own future. Because if we are to just push pause at this point and not invest in this process, we're going to be in a position of reacting to things as they fail. And we do not want to be in that position, because that's very expensive, and we want to make conscious choices about our future. We do not want those things to happen to us. We also want to remind you, and several of you mentioned this on the way in, and I say this at every meeting, and I'm not going to disappoint. I'm going to say it again tonight. Guess what? There is no zero cost option, okay? Our buildings are on average more than 60 years old. So spending nothing on the buildings is not an option. The other thing that we said last month is we're not in the building business, we are in the education business. And I will tell you, that is why I'm excited about this meeting tonight. Because tonight we are going to be talking about education. And we're going to be talking about the future of education. And we're going to be talking about how do we continue to prepare the students of Upper Arlington to be wildly successful in the careers of their choosing after high school. One of the things I love about Upper Arlington is the fact that we prepare our students well, and our students go out from here and they are wildly successful. We want more than students who are able to take tests, right? We want students who are going to be happy and who are going to make a positive difference in the world. And we have a decades-long history of doing just that, and we need to make sure that our future is even better than our past. And so we're going to be talking tonight about the educational environments that we want to provide for students today and tomorrow and for the next 50 years. It is an exciting conversation. And we know that the world is changing, and the world is changing quickly. And so we need to be really thoughtful about this, because we are actually planning tonight for educational environments that are still going to be in use in Upper Arlington in the year 2065. Think about that. Because 60 years ago, our community provided the buildings we are still using today. And I bet you 2015 seemed like a long way off back then. But time passes quickly. And so we are thinking about how to meet the needs of our kids today and tomorrow and all the way through 2065. And so we are very excited about this. You could give me one more slide. One more slide. This, I think, is just a great quote to kick off our evening. If you know John Dewey, he's a famous educational philosopher, and one of the things he talked about, and this was a long time ago, but if we teach today's students as we did yesterday, then we are robbing them of their tomorrows. And that was true 80 or 90 years ago, and it's true today. We have to make sure that we are preparing our kids for their future, not our past. And that's why this is an incredibly important process. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Steve, and he's going to get us started this evening.
Well, thank you, Paul. My name is Steve Turks. Some of you may have seen me before in previous presentations. Others that are here for the first time this evening may have not. I'm an architect. I am a principal with the firm Perkins & Will out of Chicago. I am joined tonight by several colleagues, one of which is this blonde-haired lady over here, Amy Ekman, waving her hand. Amy's an associate principal with the firm. We've been working together for a long time on these kinds of projects. We're teamed with Moody Nolan, and Keith DeVoe, an Upper Arlington resident, is here from Moody Nolan. And behind Keith is Jackie DeGarmo. Jackie is an educational consultant, actually a former client of ours, ex-superintendent. Sometimes she says recovering superintendent. but a great thinker and somebody who's constantly sort of nudging us and pushing us in the right direction. So we appreciate that very much. And Kurt is here from Turner Construction, the construction advisor for the project. Ooh, did I miss anybody? No? Okay. So as Paul mentioned, we're going to keep this, even though there's a lot of people in the room, and frankly I'm thrilled that you're here. It really says something about Upper Arlington that so many people have turned out for this type of event. We want to keep this a little bit informal as is possible. We've got a number of slides to share with you. There will be pretty quickly a break where we're going to ask you to address a couple of questions that are on the table in front of you. But as we go through this tonight, as I go through this, if you have a question, please raise your hand and ask it. We'll do the best we can to keep ourselves on pace and on track, even answering a few questions along the way. But if you feel compelled, shout it out. We'll try to get to it. Okay. So really, this evening is actually a direct result of feedback that we got at prior building team meetings. As we were beginning to talk about options, any number of people came up to us and said, well, we don't know what we don't know about educational environments. What are some interesting educational environments? It'd be great if we could learn more about those and see those. And while it would be great to take all of you on airplanes and fly you around the country to schools, it's much more efficient and effective for you if we just sort of bring it to you here in the form of a presentation. So that's really why tonight is landed on the calendar. It's really in direct response to input that we got from you all. I really like starting these kind of presentations with this quote from Einstein. We can't solve our problems by using the same kind of thinking we used when we created them. It relates, I think, in a lot of ways to Dewey's quote that Paul just shared. If we're thinking about education for the future of your children, if we think about it in terms of the way we've always thought about it, we may be doing ourselves a disservice. Another quote from Eric Hoffer, it's in a time of drastic change, it's the learner who inherits the future. The learned usually find themselves equipped to live in a world that no longer exists. Right? So it's those of us that have acquired those sort of competencies to continually learn, to perhaps even as necessary reinvent ourselves, that will do well in the future. As an architect, I'm always interested in how other facilities and other industries have responded to change. And so one of the things we're sort of leading off tonight talking about is just this whole notion of change. And And I suspect many of you in your own careers and jobs and businesses have experienced this over the last last decade, right? The amount of change that we've experienced has been really phenomenal. I could hold up my iPhone here just as an example and ask you, what in your lives has this device replaced? Right? What don't you have now that you used to have because you have this? So start answering me some. Did we do this once already? A watch. Somebody said their watch. What else? Camera. Calendar. Yeah, right? A landline. I don't have a GPS in my car anymore. I don't need it. I have this. Right? Encyclopedias. Okay, when's the last time you pulled an encyclopedia off the shelf? Right? So my father-in-law has a set of Encyclopedia Britannicas at home. He still has it, actually. He was trying to give it away. Honestly, he could not find one person that was willing to take it. You know, why would they? Right, but if I think about how airports have reacted over the time, sort of aviation at its infancy, commercial aviation at its infancy, the airports were really not such nice places, actually, right? And we think about today how the technology around aviation has changed. This is the new Boeing Dreamliner. It's built in actually pieces in many different countries. It was designed in many different countries in a very collaborative effort. Very different than when the Boeing 747 was designed, surely, which was years ago, by the way. So it's changed quite dramatically. If you think about the same idea relative to healthcare, right? A operating room from, maybe circa 1950, if you took that surgeon and put him in a modern operating room, it might look kind of familiar to him or her, but the tools and the equipment would be very, very different, right? And so, when you think about this now relative to schools, you think, there's somebody who's maybe not having a good day, right? It might be because her chair is bolted to the floor and she can't move it, which actually in that picture is true. The chairs, the desk don't move. But we think about this relative to schools, and you think back 50 years, what did schools look like? And think about what they look like today, right? So here's a photo. On the left is a library from, I'm going to say circa 1910 or so. And on the right is a much more contemporary library. You can tell it's contemporary because it's a color picture. But if you let that picture go black and white, and you say, what's really the difference between those two spaces? Not a lot, right? So in a lot of respects, facilities for schools had not kept pace with the pace of change, and it's probably no secret to any of you that change is the new normal, right? It's not it's not decelerating, it's accelerating. Schools today really need to begin to recognize that and keep pace with change. The implementation of technology, the way that students are being grouped in collaborative groups to work around projects is very, very different than sort of traditional education. Now, that traditional education looked like that first picture, right? Students sitting in rows, teacher at the front. After all, the teacher had all the information, right? Today, if one of my kids wants to know something, they go straight to this, right? Now, most of you have had this experience because I'm going to guess, right? Something breaks in your house or you need to know how to do something, what do? Google it or go to YouTube. I would be willing to bet there's probably almost nothing you can't fix by looking at a YouTube video, right? I'm shocked every time, like my dryer breaks. I wonder if that's on YouTube. Sure enough, the exact model, and somebody's fixing the exact thing that's wrong with my dryer is on YouTube. I just watch it and I go fix it. But the way technology is influencing education today is pretty phenomenal. And so it actually, it sort of begs the question, right? The teacher was always that vessel of all the information, and your job was to make sure all the students had all that information. How does that dynamic change when that's no longer the case? And it just isn't, right? The teacher is still incredible. So don't take my message the wrong way. The teacher in the classroom is still one of the most important things we can do, if not the most important thing we can do in classrooms, is put a good teacher in with a group of students, right? But I think we can probably all agree they can't have all the information. It's impossible. So what matters in our increasingly innovation-driven economy is not what you know, but what you can do with what you know. Okay? And there's a big difference there. So it's not just about all that information that you might know and have to memorize in school. It's about what can you actually do? What are those competencies you might have as a student? What are those habits of mind you might have as a student? I mean, do you have grit? And do you have resilience? And how do you deal with failure? And how do you communicate with other students? And do you work effectively in groups on projects? Right? Because after all, in my business as an architect, I collaborate with people all the time. So I want to be working with creative people, people who are good collaborators, people who have good interpersonal skills. So we're looking for all of those things in the folks that we hire. And I'd be willing to bet many people sitting in this room at one point in your jobs are hiring other people. And I'd be willing to bet that you're looking for those kinds of skills and aptitudes as well. And so we think about today's students, and the research would tell us, sort of traditional education, you read something, you hear it, right? Reading it out of a textbook, the teacher's talking to us in a classroom. The research would tell us if we can also see it and especially experience it, right? We did any number of, and we'll see some of the quotes here later on this evening, surveys with students in this district, and one of the common themes was they want to actually do things, right? They want to work on projects. And so that's something that students crave. But what's great about that is the research would tell us if we give them those experiences and those opportunities, the amount of information that they will retain and the stickiness of that goes way, way up, right? So it's not memorize it, regurgitate it for a test, and then 2 weeks later, what was it we studied, right? It stays with them, which is the whole point after all. So we think about, we're talking about future-ready schools. For many years now, and I'll remind you, it's 2015, we've been talking about 21st century schools. Us architects have been, right? Over 15 years into the 21st century, so we need to kind of stop using that term. So we're now talking about future-ready schools, which I think has much more of a longevity of a name than 21st century schools. But there's any number of different qualities from a physical building standpoint, design standpoint that a future-ready school might have. It's designed to be student-centered. The 20th century school, some folks call a factory model school, was really designed to be teacher-centered, right? It was teachers standing at the front of the classroom in control of a group of students. And we're talking today about students, personalizing, and Upper Arlington has done a lot of work around this, personalizing learning for each student. All students learn differently. They have different things that motivate them, different things that are of interest to them. So how do you tap into that? And how do you provide those opportunities? It adapts to change. It supports skill acquisitions. It's safe and secure. Safety and security came up as a fifth guiding principle after our first community engagement session, so that one was added. It supports community use. After all, schools are hubs in their communities, right? So how do you provide that kind of community use and make it easy and graceful for that type of use to happen? It's flexible. It's a hugely important topic today, especially as we think about that sort of uncertain, unpredictable future. What kind of facility will we need 20 years from now relative to schools? You sort of need a crystal ball to be able to figure that one out. But if we can design with flexibility, adaptability in mind, then hopefully the school can morph as it needs to accommodate change. So that's not flexibility, not just dealing with space, but deals with furniture as well, and many other aspects around flexibility. A future-ready school should be sustainable, we think, right? It should be energy efficient, cost efficient, maintainable. But there's a lot of other things about sustainability which are really, really great, sort of hand in glove with education. When we think about sustainability, we think about energy performance, but we also think about the quality of daylight. We know researchers tell us that students actually learn better when they're in a properly daylit space, when there is the appropriate thermal comfort, when the acoustical quality in the environment is good. Any number of physical factors in the building that can actually affect performance. And there's any number of other things, but what we're really trying to get to is at the bottom is, how can we design schools, spaces that have an impact on student performance, right? Because after all, that's what we want for our kids. We want them to succeed and do well. So there's the 20th century model, right? Teacher at the front, teacher's the red dot. Kids sitting in rows, nicely organized rows, facing forward, and sort of the empty vessels, waiting to be filled with information. That future-ready, you can see we crossed off 21st century here. Future-ready environment is more about students working together collaboratively in groups around projects, hopefully projects that might span across content or disciplines, right? For a long time, we've organized education around go to that room and do English, and then the bell will ring, and now go to that room and do math, and the bell will ring. And again, I'm not criticizing subjects. I love subjects, but it's not really the way we work, right? In our own lives, we don't put the math hat on and then put the English hat on. So, but there are ways to organize content around projects where you are learning math, you are learning English, you are learning social studies. You might be learning a foreign language at the same time around a project, right? And which are active and engaging projects for kids. And so those environments look quite different than those 20th century environments. So we're going to take the second half of this, actually mostly the second 2/3, and look at some of those types of environments. But before we do that, we're going to do what we've been calling in our previous sessions, table chats. So everybody has got on their tables a sheet that looks like this one. There are 4 questions on it. You right now only need to be thinking about and paying attention to the first 2 questions. So what we'd like you to do is, just as individuals, take a few minutes, think about those questions, jot down some notes, and then take a few minutes and share your thoughts with your table mates. Reminder, what you share on your sheets will go up on the website. So keep that in mind when you're ready. All right, folks, if I can get your attention. Let's try to refocus with the whole big group here. All right. So Amy is going to help me here. Who's got a couple of things they might like to share about question 1? We only have time for a couple. I wish we could do more, but all of your comments will go up on the website, so you can always go back and review what other folks thought and said. But just a couple sort of ones that are really burning at you that you really that you would like to share with the entire group. Just raise your hand, or if you can talk real loud.
Sure. Internet data centric.
Okay. Internet data centric.
Safety as people access the buildings, and even within the buildings have safe zones.
Have safe zones. Again, safety and security was a 5th guiding principle that was added, so that's definitely part of one of the things we're looking at. Anybody else? Yeah, in the back.
A connection with nature so that the buildings aren't so secure to the point where children are like in,
Prison? It wouldn't be the first time I've heard an analogy between schools and prisons, by the way. But your point is well taken, right? All learning doesn't happen inside. It can happen outside as well, right? So making indoor-outdoor connections is important. One more. Yeah, over here in the back.
Internationally focused beyond just the borders of the city, the state, and the country.
Yeah, good point, right? After all, we do live in a global society. We're connected now in ways that we've never been connected before. So recognizing that is very important. Okay, the next question. What kinds of experiences do we need to ensure for all of our students? Yeah.
You said lab work in all classes, you have an experience in mind, just in science, but in all classes.
Yeah, right. So not just in science, right? My high school, about the one time I would collaborate with other students was in a science lab. And that was with one other person, right? In every other class, it was sit in your desk, do your own work, don't talk to your neighbor, right? Then you go in the work world and say, oh, talk to your neighbor, collaborate, right? Yeah.
The importance of the aspect of access to books. A lot of times in these schools, we go, books just disappear. And it's something I personally really concerned about.
Yeah.
I want to see our libraries grow.
There's still this, the access to real physical books, I think is what I'm hearing, right? So there's still something nice about holding a book in your hand, right? That being said, we need to balance that against all the other forms of information that are available, if I can borrow your cell phone, on this thing, or some other electronic device, right? Yeah, real quickly. Go ahead.
I'm going to chime in with him because you were talking about your encyclopedias earlier.
Yeah.
And I think I probably learned a lot when I flipped to history and all the things that were around me. So
Right.
I think books are very important, and your old encyclopedias are good. Send it to the elementary where they can look at it, and it doesn't matter if it's old, it's still got a lot of really good information.
It does.
So-
It does, if I can push back a little bit, it's got a lot of really good information, it's got a lot of outdated information, right? Right? Like, look up the Soviet Union, and you're,
Well, look up ISIS.
yeah, right, you can't find it, yeah.
Experience many kinds of groupings, so they learn how to work together, and they also learn how to maintain responsibility that they are adding to the group.
Yeah. Did everybody hear that? Experience many types of grouping so that they have that experience of working with others, but also, working on their own and what they're responsible for bringing to that group. Good. Yeah. One more. Then we got to move on.
I'd say time and space and materials for authentic and hands-on learning.
Okay.
All of those kind of work hand in hand for it to be successful.
Okay. Did everybody hear that? Time, space, and materials for authentic types of learning, right? Providing those authentic kinds of real experiences for kids. All right, let's move on. Okay, now we are going to look at some environments, and I do want to preface this with a couple of things. You have the schools you have. So this presentation, this part of the presentation is meant to begin to share ideas, right? Most of the schools that you'll see, most of the spaces that you'll see are within public school districts, okay? They were designed with typical public school district budgets. So you might see something that looks very nice. I would say, thank you. But I would also say that good design does not necessarily mean it costs more, right? And I firmly believe that that's true, right? Sometimes we'll show parents, oh, it just looks too expensive, we can't afford that. It's not necessarily the case, okay? So just keep that in mind. So we need to look at this slide for just a second. So future ready schools, and we're going to start filling in some blanks. And so this is going to be sort of an image survey with some ideas thrown in as we look at these images. Should be welcoming, right? They should be warm, welcoming, inviting spaces. That are nicely daylit, that are maintainable, that have places that make you feel comfortable, that might have a variety of colors and textures, that places that you feel good when you walk into it. They should be, to your point, secure and safe places. So what you see up on the screen it's a computer made image, sort of the outside of the building, the front entry doors. This is a very typical configuration that we do in all of our work now, which is you can get through this set of doors, but you can't get through this one. You may be able to open this door depending on how the school wants to operate it and get in here to be checked in, make sure you're somebody that should be allowed in the school, and then you're released into the school. A lot of schools today are even locking this door and verifying that person while they're in the vestibule. Okay? So they should be safe and secure. So access control to any school building today especially is a big deal. So we should be paying attention to this. Future-ready schools provide ample daylight. I mentioned earlier that a well-daylit space educational environment is actually, research has shown, actually improves test scores on standardized tests, both in reading and math. One other thing I want to point out on here, you might see these quotes appearing on any number of slides. This one, big windows, a lot of light. So this is an Upper Arlington Middle School student. So anytime you see that, pay attention to that, because this is what your kids are asking for. Okay? This school, by the way, we did a little design charrette with a bunch of elementary kids, and one of the elementary kids drew this sort of wavy roof line. So you never know when you ask a kid what their school should look like, what it might mean in the ultimate reality of that school. I think that roof is quite beautiful, actually, and it was a great idea. Future-ready schools are appropriately configured, right? They have the right amount of space. One of the things that will come out in the educational adequacy assessment is most of your classrooms in the district today are rather small, right? They were designed for that efficient row of chairs and the teacher standing at the front. They weren't designed for that sort of group work, the collaborative work. The future-ready schools also have the right amount of storage in the right places. They're appropriately configured. Look at the quote again. Bigger classrooms would help because most of the time when we do group work, some groups have to go out in the hallway. Right? So, there's two spaces that can open to each other, have the appropriate technology, the appropriate furniture that allow the tables and chairs to be ganged together for that type of group work. They promote collaboration. It's one of those skill sets, those habits and minds that we're looking for today. So I learn best when it's hands-on activities, when we get to actually do things we're learning about. So a space where students, we think about every surface in the building being a place for kids to collaborate. So here even the columns are painted with a special paint. It's called Idea Paint that you can actually write on with markers. You'll notice some students back here in the background in a more acoustically private small group space, so when you need that sort of a huddle space, other students working in a more open kind of collaborative environment. Again, promoting collaboration. We want to be able to do that in classrooms, but we want to be able to do that in many spaces in schools, right? So whether we're talking about lobbies, this happens to be a sort of a student lounge area, cafeterias, hallway spaces. This one in particular has a large sort of amphitheater type stair in it that allows, not only can you go up and down, but you can also sort of pull off to the side and have a seat. We also look at, and we think our more informed clients actually are looking at what's happening out there in corporate America in terms of the way some of the most innovative, creative companies are organizing themselves around space and in space. Companies like IDEO, Google, Microsoft are providing these kinds of very intensive spaces for their employees to collaborate. Steve Jobs, when they designed Pixar, he was very intentional about designing it so that you would get these sort of serendipitous collisions of people, right? So you get these collisions of people, but you also get these collisions of ideas that sort of bounce off of each other and grow off of each other. And so could we think about schools in that way? Right? If one of the things we want is our students to be creators and innovators, how do we provide the kind of environment that allows that to naturally flourish? A couple of examples, not our work, but MIT Media Lab is kind of collaboration on steroids. If you know anything about MIT Media Lab, it brings together some of the best minds across many disciplines to work and tackle projects. The Stanford D School, I like to think about that as a hackable space, right? It's a space that you can morph and transform to make it do what you need it to do, right? Traditional schools, fixed hard walls, don't allow that type of thing to happen. You notice sort of copious amounts of space to get ideas up on the wall, to make that stuff evident and make it very apparent. Here at Eastbrook Middle School, you'll notice classrooms here in the darker shade of blue, but what is labeled as a project lab, which is this photograph to the right, which is as much space, if not more, than the actual regular classroom space. So students can come right out from their classrooms. Those two classrooms that adjoin each other that had the operable wall that disappeared, that's these spaces here. So they have that sort of flexibility, but they also, students are working across content area, across disciplines, on projects every day. So that's actually not a stage photograph, that's just what happens there every day. At Drew Senior High School in Atlanta, also very focused heavily on project work. You'll notice students working out in this large project lab. The furniture is very flexible. The regular classrooms are back here. There's technology that allows you to pull the presentation up on the wall. Teachers can see what's happening out here. They can send students back and forth and still have visual control over them, or visual sight lines over them. So the space is, it flexes to allow you to do what you need to do. Other ideas, supporting project work. I think somebody mentioned doing projects. I learn best when it's hands-on. We actually get to do the things we're learning about. Right? So how do we provide those types of spaces in schools? Students want to make physical things, but they also oftentimes want to make digital things. Right? So we need to live in both sort of the analog and the digital world. So providing these types of spaces for students to be able to create a video, for instance, and edit that video and get their portfolio, to be digitized and perhaps even online. There's a whole big movement happening in schools today around the maker movement. The maker movement is really interesting. It's very much connected to sort of doing projects. It's usually spaces that have a lot of different types of equipment, tools, supplies that allow students to go in and put objects and three-dimensional things together. So you might have a space that's more heavily geared towards STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. So it might have a couple of 3D printers and a laser cutter. But it also might have some paper toilet dispenser, the inside of the rolls, and masking tape and clothespins to allow kids to begin to experiment with that stuff and make things, right? This is a maker space. It's called the New View Studio. It's in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And students will come from other school districts and spend several months at New View doing interdisciplinary projects, real projects actually, where they're creating pretty interesting stuff. And so it's an interesting sort of burgeoning movement in schools today. If we're going to be having kids make things, students make things, where do they display the evidence and those artifacts of that learning? Whether it's two-dimensional, three-dimensional, or even digital, right? So where are we intentionally providing those areas for those displays and ways to curate those displays? We need to be thinking, I talked about flexibility, so we need space that can sort of morph and flex and allow students to configure themselves in any number of different ways. So here at Pitt River Middle School, regular classroom, you can see off to the left nice windows that bring in ample daylighting, mobile, flexible furniture that allow any number of different configurations. But when the wall disappears, the students can configure themselves. We can bring 3 classrooms together, so it could be 3 teachers with 75 students instead of 1 with 25. Right? So it allows different types of learning to happen. In a science lab, for instance, regular science lab, utilities around the perimeter here, instead of having those fixed lab stations, we can have some utilities in the ceiling that allow tables to be ganged in the middle. The tables are lightweight, the furniture, the chairs are lightweight. They can do labs at the perimeter, but we can also open a partition and reveal an additional 400 square feet of space. When the partition's closed, that's an enclosed 400 square feet of space that actually allows science projects to happen, right? That's something that might run over a 2-week period. Because typically in schools, and especially in high schools, you know, a 45-minute science lab, the bell rings, the teacher has to reset for that next lab, right? So how do you do a long-term science project? Well, you can't. So that space is not in the master schedule. It doesn't belong to anybody except the teacher. I need it for this week. And another partition reveals and allows 2,500 square feet of space now to become connected. Now all kinds of other possibilities open themselves up, right? At the scale of the classroom, the furniture is really important, right? So this typical sort of teacher at the front, students in sort of a lecture mode, or kids working in small groups, or sort of more of a UN seminar style. And it's really about as fast as, okay, kids, regroup. 15 or 20 seconds later, they're regrouped, right? So it's that sort of instantaneous flexibility. The future-ready classroom and school is connected on many different levels. It's definitely connected with technology, but it's also connected in terms of its visual transparency inside the environment, right? So I can see from one space to the other, and I can, you know, learning for a long time is happening behind closed doors and solid walls. And so it's hard to get kids excited sometimes about things that they just don't know are happening in their own building. So if you allow them to see that, oh, that's actually interesting to me, I want to learn more about that. Or they may be physically connected, right, with, you know, here in this rendering, these wood doors that have glass that bifold away and allow the classroom to actually connect to sort of an open breakout collaborative space just outside of the room. Like here in Reynoldsburg, where these glass partition doors peel away and allow a more corridor collaborative space to connect to the classroom. Or here in New Albany, where classrooms have these sort of almost garage doors that go up and allow classrooms to connect to this large collaboration zone. So when you're actually in this school, and this is actually a school that is on the tour. Where's Chris? We'll be in, when's?
Hopefully in January, February, anyone's interested, we're going to take a bunch of school buses, and then whoever wants to go, we're about to do Albany and visit this building right here, which is a 2-8 building, but built by actually Moody and Nolan. So.
Yeah, built by Moody and Nolan, so I should have mentioned that. But I would defy you to sort of go into this building and say, and I would ask you, where's the corridor in this building? Right? It's kind of hard to find. Right? So think about how much space we put in schools to get from point A to point B, and that's the only thing that you ever do with it, right? So we can actually make the space work a lot harder for us. That future-ready school is definitely sustainable. It's energy efficient. It has any number of different sustainability features to it, from how we conserve water to how we conserve power, how energy efficient it is. But as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of things about sustainability, whether we're talking about daylighting or indoor air quality, that are hand in glove with what's good for learning, right? So it has an interesting bottom line. It's dollars to the district every year after the building's built. It's not money you're spending on energy that can go to be used somewhere else. And it's helping to improve student performance. So this is actually the inside of that building. It's the Blue Valley CAPS. It's a high school program. It's in Kansas. Kids are working on interdisciplinary projects for real clients that have real schedules, and the work that the kids do in these various strands, whether it's bioscience or engineering, is incredible. A couple of women, young women, invented something they call the Magi straw. The Magi straw is about this long. It's got a series of filters inside it. It was intended for third world countries so that when you drink from one end, the polluted water that goes in one end is potable by the time it reaches your lips, right? Amazing. They have a full patent on the Magi straw. There have been 11 or 12 patents that have come out of this program. Incredible. Can you imagine? So that looks good on a high school, college. If I'm applying for a college, right? I have a patent. Now, there's something that separates you from the pack, right? I'm serious. That's a separator. CAPS has got all sorts of space to allow kids to collaborate. It's basically a collaboration machine, right? Happens on a daily basis. But that connective tissue that I mentioned, the corridor space, we can make it work hard, right? Classrooms on the right, media center on the left. This is an elementary environment. We need to think about the whole child, certainly, right? Whether we're talking about performance arts, music, visual arts. You know, Upper Arlington is so well known for its arts, right? So we need to be really cognizant of that. Whether we're talking, again, performance arts, this happens to be a dance space, a theater space. The theater here is wonderful at the high school. And wellness, and fitness and wellness, right? Whether we're talking about gymnasiums, or fitness and training rooms. This happens to be a rock climbing wall here on the inside rock climbing wall. Natatoriums. What we're looking at here is an 8-lane, 25-yard pool, a diving well, a separate warm-up pool over here, or even a field house, right, which has multiple interior stations, an elevated running track. If you think about when we did the building team meeting for the high school, one of the things we had up on the screen was the athletics that the high school had the day it opened in 1957 and what it has now. The amount of sports and programs that you have now are phenomenal, right? We have kids here at 10 o'clock at night still practicing. Right, so these kind of facilities really begin to alleviate that. Somebody mentioned the outdoor environment, right? And so that connection to the outdoor environment is huge in a future-ready school. I think we should have, quote here, I think we should have better outdoor classrooms so we can have more options. Right, but here's an elementary school in Atlanta, very sustainable. You can see it in the architecture, right? Here are the rain barrels, the kids, little kids, come out, fill up their rain barrels. They're responsible for maintaining the roof garden. We need to think about lots of different types of spaces in the school, one of which is that sort of traditional library, right? There's really been a pendulum shift and swing now from students and being sort of the consumers of information to being the creators of it. Very different mindset, right? So the space needs are different, right? The place to create that digital content. We call this sort of the genius bar. But the idea here is a place for kids to collaborate, work in groups, still pull that book off the shelf if they want to and sit down and read in a quiet space. But it's no longer just about that. It needs to do many different things. Here at a high school in Washington, D.C., again, that sort of open collaborative space with more cozy, soft seating is important. And we also need to think about our relationship to food and how food is prepared and served. If we're thinking about the whole child, we can't leave this piece of it out, right? So, not our work of a firm that I very much admire, VNDO in Charlottesville, Virginia, but a school that actually really tackles that, right? Fresh food served daily, sort of teaching kitchens to teach little kids about healthy eating and healthy cooking. Another project I want to share real quickly is a project that we've got going into construction in Shanghai, China. This is an existing school for Shanghai American School. It's not a public school, so I'll preface with that. But you can see it's a very traditional, this is the existing building, very traditional floor plan with classrooms on either side of the corridor. Sort of very 20th century, but you know, what we all grew up with and experienced. In talking to them, though, it's not how they wanted teaching and learning to look like. We did an activity survey with them, and I don't have time to belabor this, but if you look at this one right here, which is direct instruction. When we asked them, in your ideal scenario, how much time would you have kids working in that sort of, teacher at the front, kids, and it was 12% of the time. So why would we design spaces that really are designed to do that when you only want to do it about 10% of the day? So the floor plan was morphed into something very different as a result of that conversation a lot more. Where science is across the top, a series of maker spaces. And so the reason I'm showing this is it is possible to take that 20th century model, that factory model, and transform it into something else, okay? As we're doing it. And across the bottom is the Innovation Institute, and that's English, math, social studies, and science teachers that come together and work with kids that are focused on interdisciplinary projects. They're working in small teams constantly. So what that looks like is a series of classroom spaces that have operable walls. So every one of those that you see with that red dotted line has an operable wall. In the science area, the balance of the space is either an area for faculty to collaborate, either here or here, a series of small group spaces for 6 to 8 kids to work in a collaborative way, but have some acoustical separation. Even a series of individual workrooms. Sometimes it's important and students need a place where it's just quiet and I can be by myself and study. So where are those types of places? So the all open answer is not the right answer, right? I think the right answer is providing variety and flexibility. Again, I don't have a lot of time. We're running a little bit low on time, but making the corridors and other spaces work really hard. These are all small group spaces. The typical lab spaces are here, but they're open and flexible, so they're really excited that chemistry is going to be able to see what biology is doing, right? And they're actually going to share equipment, right? So their total footprint that they need for equipment is going down in this space. So they're actually going to be using the space in a much more efficient way. Spaces can gather and join to each other. The classroom walls can disappear, so I can grab all that space if I want to. The same thing in makers. Garage doors that will lift up that allows making to extend out into the hallway. Same thing in the Innovation Institute. These are operable walls that slide across there. So when you actually layer all those kind of uses on top of each other, something kind of magic happens, right? Almost every square foot of the space can be used in one form or another, right? So the place, those typical corridors that really are just designed to get you from point A to point B can do many different things for you now. So this is kind of what it looks like in a top-down look. There's this sort of feature wall that winds its way all the way through. We end up calling that the cell wall. There's a long story that I don't really have time to tell you about how that came into creation. But this is a look in the Innovation Institute. The big idea here is kids are working in groups, right? And they need a lot of marker board space. Remember that D-School photograph I showed you from Stanford D-School? Had lots of marker boards. That was the inspiration for this. So there's a half a dozen marker boards on wheels and tracked into the ceiling that roll back and forth across this. This is an in-bed smart TV in that, so I can roll it out to where I need it, plug it in. There'll be an Apple TV attached to it. I can throw my presentation. I can work with a group of kids. So I can collaborate around technology as well. Classroom in the back with glass walls that sort of disappear and allow one space to morph into another space. This is on the maker side. This is the Fab Lab. This is kind of the dirty make space that's got the CNC router and a couple of wood cutting pieces of equipment. The sort of the clean side of the maker space that is more technology based. The garage doors that wrap up, that fold up to the ceiling and allow one space to connect to another. So again, really just an example of how sort of taking that 20th century model and morphing it forward into the 21st century. The last one I'll share you, I'm going to get to just the AXO for this real quickly, is an elementary project that we've got under construction in Kansas City. It's going into what is essentially an existing footprint of an existing building, so it's, as much as anything, it's an interiors project. Same kind of conversations, but at an elementary level, right? About what kind of work do they want and what kind of work do they want to see their students doing. Yes, they need spaces for direct instruction. They need spaces that connect with technology and small group instruction. But they also need a lot of space for kids to work on projects. So furniture is a big deal in this environment. Sort of collaborative types of furniture, different kinds of furniture that allow you to connect with technology. that allow you to sort of, cuddle up with a book if you want to do that. And these are just some simple renderings of what that might look like. So I want to leave you sort of at the end of this with a story. The story goes like this. In the late 1800s, let's say 1880, if you wanted to have a photograph taken, you went to a guy that looked something like this, and he had a piece of equipment that looked like this camera, right? Tripod camera, one of those big boxy things. He had a glass plate that had some chemical coatings on it that he would slide in the back, and he had a hood he would put over his head. And he would pose you and stand very still, and you would take the picture, right? So it was an expensive piece of equipment, and very few people had it, right? So you had to go someplace to have your picture taken. Kodak turned that on its head, right? In the late 1800s, they invented what is essentially the first point-and-shoot camera, right? They would give it to you with film in it. You would use that film up. You'd take it back to them. They'd take the film out. You pay them a few bucks. They'd load in some more film for you, and they would develop that film and give you the pictures. It was an amazing thing, right? And Kodak, as you know, is one of those brands that is recognized around the world, right? They became the brand for print film, right? In fact, they made a lot of cameras. They made this camera that I had when I was a kid, right? You always remember that camera? They had that square bulb on it. You take a picture, the bulb would rotate, and you could take 4 whole pictures with that bulb. 4, right? So they made cameras, but where they really excelled in terms of innovation was around making film. That was Kodak's bread and butter, right? So here's quiz. What is that? And what's that guy holding on his shoulder? Shout it out. A video camera. Not right. What? Slide projector. No.
Development.
Like a Polaroid. Getting a little closer. It's in the 1970s. In the 1970s. It's the world's first digital camera. That's it. It weighed 8 pounds. That's a fact. I think the year was something like 1976. The guy's name is Steve Sessions. He invented he worked for Kodak, and Kodak invented the world's first digital camera. Guess what they did with it? They stuck it on a shelf, right? They didn't see what was coming. Kodak, that company, that innovative company, whose main focus was film, said, we can't deal with this because this is what we do, and we do it really well, right? In 2012, Kodak filed for bankruptcy, right? Digital photography has just run them over. So the moral of the story is, when we're thinking about planning schools for our kids, whether we're doing it in existing spaces or renovated spaces, I would encourage us to really think about this question on the screen, right? Are we planning for our past? Are we planning for their future? Okay? So with that, we are now going to look at the last 2 questions on that sheet. We're going to take about just 10 minutes to do this. I do want to remind you that the sign-in sheets are on your table. If you haven't signed in, please do that. And there is one other sheet on your table that, before I lose your attention, I'd like to go over with you and have you fill out before you leave. And it looks like this. Okay?
They're going to have them in a minute.
Oh, they're going to have them in a minute. You don't have them yet. This is please put the name of a building that you're on the building team for, and we hope it's pretty self-explanatory. There are some options there. If you'd like to see these options explored at your building, the first option is repairing the building. It's essentially fixing what's there. If I can get your attention, please, folks, hang with me for just a little bit longer. The second option is to renovate it. So it's not just repairing it, but it might be changing it and altering it in some way. And the third option is rebuilding it. This might be replacing it, okay? And there is one other possibility on the bottom of this sheet, which is a combination. Choose two or more. So it's possible in your school you say, well, this part of the building only needs to be repaired, and that part of it we really want to see renovated or rebuilt. Right, so you could check two or more of those boxes. So if you've got some thoughts on your individual buildings that you're the building team member for, please share those on this sheet. But for now, let's tackle the two questions at the bottom of that first sheet, and we'll take about the next 10 minutes to do that.
Conversations going on. If I can have your attention just for a moment, and we're going to make sure we get you out of here on time. If you could, let's start by thanking Steve for a great job tonight. Steve, thank you very much. I hope this was a great night for you and really got you thinking, because we're going to need you to remember these things and bring this thinking back when we have our next building team meeting in January. I want you to know that the PowerPoint from tonight is already on our website. So when you go home, if you want to look at something again, it is already there. Again, with these options forms, if you are on more than one building team, Chris has more options forms, because if you're on more than one team, we would like you to fill out one for each team you're on. After you're done filling them out, feel free to just leave them on the table. If you'd like to take it with you and spend more time with it, that is fine. Drop it off at the central office or any school offices by next Friday. That's our deadline, because we need to tabulate them so we can get ready for the building team meetings in January. Also up at the table behind me where Chris is, we have the information that we distributed at the last community engagement session, all the information about the physical assessments of each building and the related costs. So if you were not able to come to the last community engagement session and you would like paper copies of all of that financial information, Chris can take care of that for you tonight. Also, if this is the first time you have come to a building team meeting, you need to get a building team folder. Guess who has those? Chris Potts has those right up here. So again, we just want to thank you for being a part of this tonight. If you're here tonight and you've not yet joined a building team, guess what I'm going to tell you? We would love to have you join a building team, one or more, and get involved in this process. We need your help, because guess what? Your voice matters. So thanks a lot and have a great evening.